Drive through the small towns of the American South and you collect the same postcard. A steeple, a war memorial, a main street going quiet the way main streets do when nobody fights for them. But 42 of these towns carry something the postcard never shows. Roads in the Virginia mountains where locals will not drive. After dark and will not say why. Whole blocks in Alabama where the last business closed before the last resident was born. Census tracts in North Carolina, where the population has steadily declined since the 1920s due to long-term economic shifts and rural to urban migration. Hollows in West Virginia, where fog arrives at the same hour every evening, regular as a train that stopped running before your father was born. These are the towns the South does not talk about, not because there is nothing to say, but because some silences have been kept so long they have become load-bearing. The modern world replaced the evening walk with a screen and called it connection, replaced silence with noise and called it comfort, replaced the unexplained with a search bar and called it progress. Here the dogs still know which porch to wait under. The creak of a gate hinge is the only announcement a neighbor needs. A wind chime turns in the gap between two houses and no hand has touched it in years. The fog rolls through the hollow and nobody reaches for a phone. Not out of ignorance, but out of something older than the instinct to ask. These valleys were forgotten by the century that forgot them first, and what was left behind did not stop existing simply because no one came back to name it. It begins with a fog on a Virginia mountain road that will not lift until morning.
Number 12, Clifton. We begin our countdown in Fairfax County with a town that looks like a postcard from the 1800s. Clifton sits just 10 miles east of Manassas, a Civil War era community that witnessed some of the bloodiest battles in American history. The brick buildings and tree-lined streets suggest nothing but charm. But drive a few miles down the road and you will find a railway overpass that has terrified locals for more than 50 years. The Colchester Overpass was built around 1906 near the site of an old Civil War railway station. Today, locals call it the Bunnyman Bridge. In 1970, Fairfax County Police received 2 separate reports about a man in a white bunny costume wielding an axe and threatening people near the bridge. Both investigations were eventually closed for lack of evidence, but the legend only grew. What makes Clifton genuinely creepy is not just the legend, it is the official response. Starting in 2003, local authorities began controlling access to the bridge during Halloween. Police now stake out the area every October. Arrests occur regularly. The fact that law enforcement takes the Bunnyman seriously enough to deploy officers more than 50 years after the original incidents tells you something about this place. A number of the small-town buildings and residences are said to be haunted by Civil War spirits. But it is the image of that white bunny costume in the darkness that keeps visitors away after sunset. Number 11, Pamplin. Head southwest to Appomattox County, and you will find a town where the commercial district sits almost entirely abandoned. Pamplin was once a prosperous 19th century community. Its economic backbone was the railroad after the tracks were laid in the 1850s. Sitting at the intersection of the Norfolk and Western rail lines, the town was a frequent stopping-off point for travelers heading across Virginia. But if the railroad was the town's spine, its heart was a factory that made clay smoking pipes. The factory opened around 1880 and was, at one point, the largest producer of such pipes in the world. At its busiest, the factory was sending more than 1 million Pamplin pipes a month down the line. Workers filled the streets. Money flowed through local businesses. The future looked bright. Then the motor car arrived. Rail travel dwindled. By the 1930s, passenger service to Pamplin had ceased entirely. Smoking habits changed too, creating challenges for the pipe factory. It was sold at auction in 1938. Today, walking through Pamplin feels like stepping into a photograph that someone forgot to finish developing. empty storefronts line the main street. Windows that once displayed goods now show only darkness and dust. The few residents who remain speak of a town that simply stopped one day, frozen in time, while the rest of Virginia moved forward. Number 10. Union Level. Drive toward the North Carolina border and you will pass a sign that makes a bold claim. Union Level, Virginia. The most visited ghost town in Virginia. Or so the sign on the building across the street would have you believe. Driving past Union Level feels like flipping through a sepia-toned photograph album at highway speed. This authentic Main Street ghost town still shows off rows of abandoned storefronts that once bustled with tobacco traders and farmers stocking up on supplies. The town sits in what was once Virginia's greatest agricultural region, where tobacco built fortunes and industry brought stage routes and railroads through the countryside. What makes Union Level particularly haunting is how visible it remains from the road. You can see the decay from your car window, the empty buildings, the faded signs, the remnants of a community that prosperity abandoned faster than morning fog burns off the fields. But here is the warning that matters. If you make the trip to Union Level, please be respectful of the remaining residents. All of the buildings here are on private property and monitored regularly by the sheriff's office. Do not trespass. The locals who still call this place home do not appreciate curiosity seekers wandering through what remains of their community. Number 9. Wash Woods. On Virginia's southeastern coast, hidden within False Cape State Park, lies a ghost hamlet that most visitors will never see. Wash Woods is accessible only by hiking or biking several miles through stunning maritime wilderness. There are no roads, no easy paths. Just sand and scrub pine standing between you and one of Virginia's most poignant abandoned communities. Once a thriving fishing and hunting settlement of roughly 300 people, Wash Woods eventually surrendered to isolation and the relentless Atlantic storms that reshaped the barrier islands over generations. Although no one really knows for certain, legend says the community began 300 to 400 years ago when sailors shipwrecked off the coast and decided to stay. The old cemetery still stands as a haunting memorial. Weathered headstones mark lives lived at the very edge of land and sea. The church steeple remains pierced the sky like a skeletal finger pointing toward heaven. The gravestones bear names of families who lived and died within sound of the waves, their descendants long scattered to other shores. Nature is reclaiming what humans abandoned here. The dunes shift. The vegetation grows wild. But those graves remain, reminding anyone who makes the trek that this was once a real community. Real families, real lives, all eventually defeated by the simple cruelty of geography. Number 8. Pocahontas. Nestled in the Appalachian Mountains just a short distance from the West Virginia border, sits a tiny town with an enormous and sinister history. Pocahontas has a population of just around 300 people today, but this place is largely considered to be where the entire Appalachian coal boom began. As early as 1750, it was known that coal existed in this part of the country. When commercial mining finally began in earnest, Pocahontas became the epicenter of an industry that would define and devastate the region for generations. During its 7 decades of operation, the mine produced over 44 million tons of coal. Workers flooded into the mountains. Company towns sprang up overnight. Fortunes were made by men who never set foot underground. The miners themselves faced a different reality: cave-ins, explosions, lung disease. The mountains gave up their coal, but they demanded payment in human lives. By the 1920s, the coal boom drastically declined. The development of the town declined with it. Today, Pocahontas feels suspended between memorial and graveyard. The old mining infrastructure remains as a testament to what was extracted here. Not just coal, but lives, health, hope. The town survives, barely, but the ghosts of those who died in the darkness below still seem to linger in the quiet mountain air. Number 7. Appalachia. The town of Appalachia in Wise County shares its name with the mountain range that surrounds it. With just under 1,800 residents, it is the smallest place on our list. But small does not mean safe. Appalachia has been ranked as one of the most dangerous small towns in Virginia, showing higher than average percentages for violent crime despite its tiny population. The beautiful mountain setting contrasts sharply with the dark underbelly that statistics reveal. And political scandal is not new to the town either. Back in 2006, 14 Appalachia residents were indicted on charges of electoral fraud. Among those charged was the town's own mayor. When even local leadership cannot be trusted, when the people elected to protect a community instead exploit it, something fundamental has broken. The town does have attractions. The Powell River Trail offers scenic hiking. The historic Kelly View School preserves local heritage. A Veterans and Miners Memorial Wall honors those who served and sacrificed. But these bright spots exist alongside a troubling reality that residents live with daily. If learning where not to wander after dark is useful to you, the subscribe button is waiting. I post these warnings every week with real research and genuine local testimonials. Number 6. Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg presents an interesting contradiction. This historic city draws tourists from around the world who come to walk the streets where George Washington once walked. They visit battlefields where some of the Civil War's bloodiest fighting occurred. They spend money in charming shops and restaurants. But that tourist economy creates problems alongside prosperity. The city reports a violent crime rate of 4.14 per 1,000 people. More troubling is the property crime rate of 39.85 per 1,000 people. These figures are particularly concerning given the city's size and its reputation as a historic gem. The high level of tourism plays a dual role in the crime dynamics here. The influx of visitors boosts the local economy, but it also increases opportunities for crimes, particularly theft and vandalism. The presence of tourists often leads to a temporary population increase that can overwhelm local law enforcement resources. And then there are the ghosts. Many legends and ghost stories abound in this historic town. A lady in white is often seen haunting a church from the 1730s where George Washington himself worshipped. The battlefields that draw tourists by day become something else entirely after dark. Visitors report hearing drums, cannon fire, and the screams of wounded soldiers on fields where tens of thousands died over 4 brutal years of the Civil War. Number 5. Diggs and Old House Woods. In Matthews County, off the coast of Gloucester, is the small, unassuming town of Diggs. It looks like a cozy little place, surrounded by the Chesapeake Bay, offering coastal views and respite from city life. But travel down Beach Haven Road just outside of town, and you come to a 50-acre patch of dense woodland that changes everything. Old House Woods has been deemed by no less an authority than the Virginia Department of Forestry to be one of the most haunted places in the entire Commonwealth. This is not local legend. This is a government agency acknowledging that something genuinely strange happens in these trees. For decades, people have talked about the remote stand of pine trees near Haven Beach. Stories tell of headless specters, of ships sailing in the air above the tree line, of buried treasure guarded by supernatural forces, and of women in white drifting between the trunks. Jesse V. Hudgens, a Matthews courthouse merchant who lived near the woods in the early 20th century, warned that Old House Woods is haunted and advised people to keep away. He said you cannot defy the guardian spirits that watch over the place and get away with it. One frequently reported apparition is the Storm Woman, a fair-haired figure in a nightgown who hovers above the treetops surrounded by blue or greenish light. She appears just before storms and shrieks warnings to nearby ships. Locals consider her one of the kinder spirits. The others are far less benevolent. Number 4. Williamsburg. The most haunted city in Virginia is not some forgotten backwater. It is one of America's premier tourist destinations. Williamsburg served as the capital of the Virginia colony and played a crucial role in the American Revolution. 3 centuries of blood and betrayal have soaked into these cobblestones. The Colonial Ghost Tour takes visitors on a roughly 90-minute moonlit walk through the haunted historic grounds. But you do not need a guide to sense that something lingers here. The weight of history presses down on these streets after dark. Consider the Ferry Plantation House. The grounds date back to 1642. After the ferry closed, several buildings were erected in succession, only to be torn down or destroyed. Eventually, the last buildings fell into disrepair and were all but forgotten by the living. But the previous residents never truly left. 11 distinct spirits have been reported to haunt this single property. Williamsburg's charm draws millions of visitors each year. They come for the living history demonstrations, the period costumes, the carefully preserved architecture. What they find, especially after sunset, is a reminder that 300 years of human drama leaves traces that never fully fade. The executed prisoners, the Revolutionary War soldiers, the enslaved people who built this prosperity but never benefited from it. They all remain. Number 3. Staunton. Known officially as the most haunted town in Virginia, Staunton carries a darkness that extends far beyond ghost stories. This is a place where institutional horror occurred within living memory. The screams of patients still seem to echo through abandoned hallways that the state would rather forget. The DeJarnette Sanitarium has unsettled residents of Staunton for over 80 years. Within those walls, forced sterilizations and lobotomies were carried out on unwilling patients who were deemed unfit to breed. Virginia's eugenics program operated here, destroying lives in the name of discredited science. The building still stands, decaying but not demolished, a monument to medical atrocity. But Staunton's horrors extend beyond the sanitarium. The train station has been rebuilt 3 times after disasters. During the Civil War, Union General David Hunter and his troops set fire to the original station. An incoming train derailed and tore through the rebuilt station only 20 years later. Spirits from these catastrophes are said to roam the third and current construction. The apparition of the derailment's sole casualty, a 17-year-old opera singer, is said to wander the platform. She is known for pulling the hair of female travelers. Then there is the Black Widow. Charlotte Kaufman lived in what is now the Spots Kaufman House, a building with a history extending over 260 years. Multiple misfortunes and deaths occurred on that property, but none so infamous as the woman locals came to call the Black Widow, whose husbands had an unfortunate tendency to die. From mass graves of Civil War soldiers to the decaying sanitarium, ghost stories are second nature to Staunton locals. They grow up with them, they live alongside them, and they warn visitors that some places in their town should not be explored after dark. Number 2. Petersburg. Petersburg experiences severe public safety challenges that go far beyond the supernatural. The violent crime rate reaches 8.18 per 1,000 people. The property crime rate hits 25.66 per 1,000. These numbers alone qualify Petersburg as one of the most dangerous cities in Virginia. In 2023, the city recorded a total of 978 crimes, 18 murders, 20 robberies, 191 assaults, 71 burglaries, 81 motor vehicle thefts. For a city of this size, those numbers tell a story of a community in crisis. The median home price in Petersburg is just $111,300. That affordability comes at a cost that never appears on a mortgage statement. Economic challenges, high unemployment, and a declining tax base create an environment where desperation becomes routine. But Petersburg's troubles have deeper roots. This city endured the longest siege in American warfare. For 9 brutal months in 1864 and 1865, Union and Confederate forces fought over this ground. Trenches still scar the landscape. Tens of thousands died within sight of homes that still stand today. The ghosts of that siege have never fully departed. Residents report seeing soldiers in period uniforms wandering the battlefields at night. They report the sound of artillery fire where no cannons exist. The weight of all that death and suffering seems to press down on Petersburg, adding supernatural darkness to the very real dangers that statistics reveal. Number 1. Blackstone. We arrive at the town that holds Virginia's most troubling distinction. Blackstone, in Nottoway County, has the highest violent crime rate in the entire Commonwealth. Approximately 933 reported violent crimes per 100,000 residents. For a town with a population under 4,000, those numbers are almost incomprehensible. Blackstone was once a prosperous railway junction. Trains brought commerce, travelers, and opportunity. Fort Pickett, now renamed Fort Barfoot, provided military presence and economic stability for decades. The infrastructure for success existed here, but something went wrong. The trains stopped bringing prosperity, and the military presence could not protect the town from economic decline. Poverty crept in, and opportunity crept out. The cycle that affects so many small American towns accelerated here with devastating results. Today, residents warn family members not to visit after dark. Online forums contain desperate posts from locals describing a community where crime has become normalized. Walking to the shop after sunset requires calculation and courage. The statistics that place Blackstone at the top of Virginia's dangerous places list match the lived experience of those who call it home. The people who remain in Blackstone are not statistics. They are families making the best of circumstances that would break most communities. They attend the same churches their grandparents attended. They shop at stores their families have patronized for generations. They love their town even as they acknowledge its dangers. Blackstone deserves better than it has received from state and federal authorities. Investment has bypassed this community for too long. Until that changes, this small Virginia town remains the place where locals most urgently warn visitors to stay away.
The last street light on that Virginia road has been flickering for longer than anyone in the county can remember, and the fog that came in behind it never fully left. But there are places further south on this map where the feeling is different, where the strangeness did not come down from a mountain or drift in through a hollow, but rose up out of the ground itself so slowly and so completely that by the time anyone thought to name it, the town had already changed. The storefronts had already gone dark. The last family had already packed the truck and pulled out of the driveway without telling a single neighbor where they were going. And what you are about to see is the most quietly unsettling stretch of road on this entire list. Hiding in a place most people drive past without a second look.
Old Cahaba in Dallas County, about 15 miles southwest of Selma, population 0. This was Alabama's first state capital, carved out of the wilderness in 1819. At its peak, around 3,000 people called it home. The town sat at the confluence of the Alabama and Cahaba rivers. Cotton money flowed through these streets. By 1860, Dallas County was the fourth wealthiest county per capita in the entire United States. Then came the Civil War. Then came the floods. Then came abandonment. By 1870, only 300 souls remained. By the turn of the century, most buildings had been lost to fire, decay, or dismantlement. What you find today are scattered ruins, crumbling columns wrapped in vines, cemetery headstones tilting at odd angles, the outline of streets that once bustled with commerce. The Alabama Historical Commission runs the site now, and they offer official ghost tours for good reason. Visitors and staff have reported disembodied voices echoing through the trees, the sounds of children laughing when no children are present. The most frequently cited apparition is a spectral woman seen walking between the cemetery and the nearby church ruins. Over and over again, always walking, never arriving. Standing among those ruins at dusk, watching fog roll off the rivers, you understand why people see things here. A town this wealthy, this important, does not simply cease to exist without leaving something behind. Belafonte in Jackson County, near Scottsboro in northeast Alabama. This was the Jackson County seat from 1821 to 1859. A proper town with a courthouse, a jail, a church, an inn, and a post office. Families built lives here. Children were born here. Then the Civil War came through and left destruction in its wake. Unlike other towns, Belafonte never recovered. It was completely abandoned by the 1920s. What remains today will make your skin crawl. Just the cemetery and a single tall chimney from the old inn. That chimney stands alone, overgrown with vines, reaching up from the earth like a finger pointing at the sky. The graves outnumber any trace of the living by hundreds to one. The years of neglect have brought an unsettling feeling to this place. Some visitors describe a presence watching them from the tree line. Others report their cameras malfunctioning only within the cemetery boundaries. The town is gone, but something lingers here among the headstones and that solitary chimney. Spectre on Jackson Lake Island near Millbrook. Population 0. This one is different because Spectre was never a real town. It was built in 2003 as a film set for Tim Burton's movie Big Fish, a complete fictional main street constructed on the banks of the Alabama River. After filming ended, the property owners told Burton to leave the buildings standing rather than bulldoze them. That decision created something genuinely strange. These buildings were only shells, facades built for cameras and never meant to last. Now Spanish moss drapes from sagging roof lines, and the structures are crumbling into the earth. A fire swept through and destroyed the commercial district entirely. Houses flood regularly. Goats roam freely through what remains. About 12,000 people visit this island every year to walk through a fake town that has become a real ruin. Shoes still hang from wires at the entrance, a tradition from the film that visitors have continued for over 2 decades. Watching a place designed for fantasy decay into something genuinely eerie creates a feeling that is hard to describe. You know it was never real, but standing there among the rotting boards and Spanish moss, that knowledge does not help. Newton in Dale County, southeast Alabama along the Choctawhatchee River. Population around 1,500. This small town is home to one of Alabama's most famous ghost stories. The tale of Skeeto's Hole. On December 3, 1864, in the desperate final days of the Confederacy, a Methodist minister named William Skeeto was dragged from his home. He had been accused of desertion, though historical evidence suggests he was actually helping Union sympathizers in the area. A mob decided his fate would be the noose. They hanged him from a water oak by the river, but there was a problem. Skeeto was a tall man and his feet touched the ground, so the soldiers dug a shallow hole beneath his feet to let him hang properly. What happened next has never been explained. For 125 years, that hole reportedly remained visible no matter how many times people tried to fill it. Townspeople dumped dirt, rocks, and debris into the depression. By morning, the hole had returned to its original dimensions. Some say Skeeto's ghost swept it clean every night. Others claim loyal friends maintained it secretly as a memorial. The phenomenon continued until 1990, when tons of rock were deposited during bridge construction. Only then did the hole finally stay filled. A memorial stands there now. The gravesite is fenced to protect it from ghost hunters. But locals still speak of the minister who proclaimed his innocence from the gallows and left a mark on the earth that refused to disappear for over a century. Arcola in Hale County sits along the Black Warrior River. The population is 0. This French settlement from the 1820s once thrived on river commerce and the cotton trade. American settlers arrived, and later the railroad bypassed the town entirely. The reasons for abandonment are mundane, but the results are anything but. What remains looks like a scene from a horror film. Gnarled branches reach across what were once streets. Among the overgrowth stands the infamous Alfred Hatch Place, known locally as the Half House. This plantation was constructed in 1855 and belonged to a figure with what locals call a shadowy history. The structure was never completed, adding to its unsettling appearance. Windows stare out from walls that simply end, rooms open to nothing. If you visit Arcola today, you visit alone. There are no services, no help if something goes wrong, no one to hear you call out. Just the ruins, the river, and the trees that have been slowly swallowing this place for a century. Selma in Dallas County, 50 miles west of Montgomery along the Alabama River. population around 17,000, down from over 28,000 at its peak. This is not a ghost town. People live here, but Selma is haunted by more than spirits. The statistics tell one story. Selma has lost a third of its population since the 1960s. The poverty rate sits at 37%. For most of the last decade, Selma had the highest rate of population loss in the entire state. You can see it in the vacant storefronts downtown, the abandoned homes with collapsing porches, and the pothole-covered streets that wind past architectural gems slowly falling into disrepair. But there is another layer here. During the Civil War, Selma served as a Confederate naval munitions center. Antebellum houses fill the historic district, creaking and shifting, giving rise to countless ghost stories. Locals say ghost stories are as common in Selma as street corners. The St. James Hotel, built in 1837, is considered one of the most haunted places in Alabama. Guests report encounters with the ghost of outlaw Jesse James, who stayed here, along with his mistress Lucinda, who is said to roam the upper floors. At Sturtevant Hall, visitors report the spirit of John Parkman, a banker who died under mysterious circumstances. The living struggle with economic decline, while the dead reportedly refuse to leave. That combination creates an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in the American South. Bear Creek Swamp near Prattville in Autauga County. Swamps are usually creepy at the best of times. Shallow, dark water, thick, concealing stands of trees, sounds you cannot identify coming from directions you cannot determine. But Bear Creek Swamp has earned a special reputation. The phenomena reported here include phantom car lights that appear and disappear on the dirt road alongside the marshland. Strange orbs float above the water. Most disturbing is the sighting of a 4-foot-tall apparition that appears directly in front of vehicles. The legend says this is the ghost of a mother searching for her lost child. Local teenagers dare each other to say the words, "We have your baby," 3 times to summon her attack. But the genuinely strange discovery came when someone found 21 porcelain dolls mounted on stakes protruding from the swamp water. No one has explained who put them there or why. Few people in the area relish driving through after dark. Those who do report the feeling of being watched from the tree line. Something about this swamp does not want visitors. Sloss Furnaces in Birmingham. This is not a small town, but a specific location that has earned its place on this list through sheer documented horror. The furnaces operated from 1882 to 1971. Producing pig iron that helped build America. The cost was paid in human lives. Working conditions were brutal beyond imagination. 12-hour shifts in temperatures exceeding 120 degrees during summer. No breaks. Poisonous gases. Deplorable housing for workers who had no other options. In the first 15 years after opening, 47 workers died on site. During the reign of Foreman James Wormwood, known as Slag, the death rate was 10 times higher than any other shift in the furnace's history. An explosion in 1888 left 6 workers burned blind. 1 painter was found boiled to death in a water tank. The legend says workers eventually pushed Slag into the molten iron. His body would have melted instantly. Whether that story is true, the hauntings are documented fact. Over 100 reports of suspected paranormal activity appear in Birmingham police records. Night watchmen have been attacked by unseen forces. Workers have been pushed from behind when no one was there. A voice has been heard screaming, "Get back to work." Activity peaks in September and October, during what would have been the old graveyard shift hours. The Boynton Oak in Mobile, Church Street Cemetery. This haunted location is not a building, but a tree. In 1835, a printer and gambler named Charles Boynton was executed for the murder of his friend Nathaniel Frost. Standing on the gallows, Boynton made a declaration. He proclaimed that a tree would grow from his grave as proof of his innocence. He was buried in the Potter's Field adjacent to the cemetery. A southern live oak now stands exactly where his body was placed in the ground. The tree has been there for nearly 200 years. Boynton's spirit has reportedly been seen sitting beneath its branches. It is a botanical proclamation of innocence that has outlasted everyone who witnessed his execution. Coincidence or something more? The tree stands there still, letting you decide for yourself. The Drish House in Tuscaloosa is widely known as the most haunted place in Alabama. The house was built in the 1830s on a 450-acre plantation by Dr. John Drish. The doctor loved gambling and drinking. In 1867, he fell down a stairway while drunk and died from his injuries. His wife Sarah became obsessed with the funeral arrangements. She kept the candles that had burned during his service and demanded they be used at her own funeral when the time came. Sarah died in 1884. Her family searched the house endlessly but could not find the candles anywhere. This is said to have angered Sarah so much that she returned from beyond the grave. Witnesses have reported seeing mysterious lights flickering in the third-story tower, and the house once caught fire there. Locals believe Sarah lit those candles herself. So there you have it. 10 places across Alabama where something terrible happened, where something unexplained persists, where the land itself holds memories that refuse to fade. From state capitals reduced to ruins, to industrial nightmares documented by police, to trees that grow from the graves of the wrongfully executed.
A screen door swings shut on a porch where the last conversation ended years ago, and the sound carries further than it should because there is nothing left to stop it. 2 states behind us now, and the map already looks different than it did when we began. The roads got quieter, the towns got smaller, the explanations stopped arriving. You start to wonder how many of these places you have driven through without noticing that the windows were dark or that the street had gone too still for a Tuesday afternoon. But the next stretch of this map belongs to towns where the strangeness does not shout. It does not slam doors or flicker lights. It sits in a rocking chair on a porch that should be empty and waits for you to notice it.
Number 10. We start our countdown in Burke County with the abandoned Henry River Mill Village. Located about 1 mile south of Hildebrand. You might recognize this place. When Hollywood needed a location to film the impoverished District 12 in the Hunger Games, they chose this crumbling collection of wooden structures. And they barely had to change a thing. The village was founded in 1905 as a cotton mill community, where over 450 workers lived in company-owned houses. They were paid $1 per day in a special currency the locals called doogaloo. This money could only be spent at the company store. Children worked in the mill alongside their parents until the government finally stepped in with labor laws. There was never running water. The final resident left sometime in the 1980s, leaving behind more than a dozen wooden mill houses frozen in time. A 2-story brick shop crawling with ivy, overgrown stone stairways that lead to nowhere. Rusted machinery sits exactly where workers left it decades ago. Faded curtains still hang in broken windows. Hollywood chose this place to represent dystopia because it already looked post-apocalyptic. A mill village frozen in time is unnerving enough. But what about a town where the devil himself supposedly walks every single night? Number 9. In the forest near Bear Creek, about 10 miles from Siler City in western Chatham County, there is a camping spot that has terrified locals for longer than America has existed. It is called the Devil's Tramping Ground. What you will find there is a 1-foot wide bear path forming a perfect circle, exactly 40 feet in diameter. Normal vegetation grows all around it, but on that circular path itself, nothing grows. The regional legend maintains that Satan himself visits this spot every night, pacing the circle as he contemplates his evil deeds. The Chatham County Deed Book contains a record from 1784 referring to this area as the Poison Field Tract. Whatever is happening here predates the founding of the United States. People who have left objects inside the ring overnight report finding them moved or vanished by morning. Dogs brought to the area whimper and refuse to go near the circle. In the 1930s, witnesses began reporting a great black beast that chased hunters away from the site. A few years back, a journalist from a Greensboro newspaper decided to debunk the whole thing. He pitched a tent directly in the center of the circle and spent the night. He survived. But he reported hearing ghostly footsteps circling his tent throughout the darkness. Scientists have tested the soil extensively. They have found nothing wrong with it. No explanation exists for why plants refuse to grow on that path. Cursed ground where nothing grows is disturbing. But what if the strange phenomena is hovering in the sky above a mountain? Number 8. In the Linville Gorge area near Morganton, people have been witnessing something impossible for over 800 years. They are called the Brown Mountain Lights. They are glowing orbs that rise from the ridge, hover in the darkness, and vanish without explanation. According to Cherokee legend, these lights date back to around 1200 AD, when a great battle was fought between the Cherokee and Catawba nations. The mysterious lights are the spirits of Indian maidens still searching for their men who died in that ancient conflict. The United States Geological Survey investigated twice in 1913 and 1922. Government scientists could not explain what they were seeing. Then came the flood of 1916. This disaster stopped all trains and cars in the region. Electrical lights were completely doused. Every conventional light source was eliminated. But the Brown Mountain Lights kept on shining through it all. A professor from Appalachian State University spent more than 20 years studying this phenomenon. His team captured footage of the lights in July of 2016. The footage confirmed the lights exist, but it offered absolutely no insight into what causes them. National Geographic has called Brown Mountain one of the 3 best places in the world to experience a natural wonder. And still, after 8 centuries, nobody can tell you what they are. Unexplained lights are one thing, but what about a creature with glowing red eyes that chases your car at 60 miles per hour? Number 7. Valle Crucis is a quiet mountain town whose name comes from the Latin phrase meaning Valley of the Cross. 2 streams meet at right angles, forming a natural cross shape. The morning mist lingers longer here than elsewhere in the mountains. The town was founded in 1842. The legend involves St. John's Episcopal Church, established in 1862. In the 1860s, townsfolk discovered the grisly remains of several people in the woods near the church. These appeared to be victims of some kind of animal attack, though no ordinary animal could explain the savagery. The minister reportedly told the congregation that Satan had taken the form of an animal and killed the unrepentant. The beast became known as a demon dog. Descriptions painted as a vicious, all-black, hulking creature with red, glowing eyes. It supposedly lurks in the old cemetery adjacent to St. John's Church. The story was revived in the late 1980s when 2 Appalachian State University students reported a terrifying encounter. The pair was driving past the old church when the creature leapt in front of their car. When they pulled over, they noticed glowing red eyes in their rearview mirror. As they accelerated away, the creature began to chase them. It kept pace even as they pushed the speedometer to 60 miles per hour. Just as the beast was about to catch them, the car crossed over the bridge where the streams meet in the shape of a cross, and the dogs stopped following them. They watched it fade into the darkness behind them. Some say the beast cannot cross running water. Others believe the cross shape of the streams creates a barrier against evil. Sightings continue to this day. Locals warn visitors not to linger near the cemetery after dark. A hellhound bound by ancient water boundaries is terrifying. But what if an entire colony of 117 people simply vanished? Number 6. On Roanoke Island near Manteo, one of America's oldest unsolved mysteries still echoes through the trees. In 1587, a group of English colonists arrived to establish a settlement. Among them was Eleanor Dare, who gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. The colony's leader, John White, sailed back to England to gather supplies. He did not make it back for 3 years. When John White finally landed on Roanoke Island in 1590, it happened to be his granddaughter Virginia's 3rd birthday. What he found was silence. The original colony was completely deserted. Over 100 men, women, and children had vanished without a trace. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle. The only clues were two carvings. On one of the wooden palisades, someone had carved the word Croatoan. On a nearby tree, just the letters C-R-O. 435 years later, we still do not know what happened. Theories have ranged from integration with local tribes to Spanish attacks to disease. None have been definitively proven. The mystery has spawned legends of its own, including tales of a ghost deer that roams the island. Some say it is the spirit of Virginia Dare herself. At least the Lost Colony left a cryptic clue. The next town harbors a pirate whose headless body reportedly still searches for his head. Number 5. Ocracoke Island sits along the Outer Banks in waters so treacherous they have earned the name Graveyard of the Atlantic. Over 5,000 ships have been claimed by these shifting sands. But the island's most famous ghost is not from a shipwreck. It is from an execution. In 1718, the notorious pirate Blackbeard made his last stand on these shores. His real name was Edward Teach, and he was cornered by Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy. Historical accounts record that Blackbeard was shot 5 times and stabbed 20 times before he finally fell. Even then, it took a blow that severed his head to stop him. Maynard hung the severed head from the bowsprit of his ship as proof. Blackbeard's headless body was thrown overboard into waters now called Teach's Hole. According to legend, that headless body swam around Maynard's ship 3 times before disappearing beneath the waves. Ever since then, locals have reported seeing a ghostly light moving beneath the water. Some believe this is Blackbeard's spirit, still searching for his missing head. On stormy nights, fishermen claim they can hear a voice calling out across the waves. A ghost pirate is chilling enough. But the next location involves 12 men who vanished from a perfectly functioning ship. Number 4. Just off Cape Hatteras lies Diamond Shoals. On January 31st, 1921, the 5-masted schooner Carol Deering was spotted drifting aimlessly. Her sails were still set. When the Coast Guard boarded the grounded vessel, they found something that defied explanation. The ship was in perfect working order. Food sat untouched in the galley, still warm. But Captain Willis Wormel and all 11 crew members had vanished completely. The lifeboats were gone. So were the logbooks. The navigation equipment had been removed. The ship's 2 cats were found alive, but not a single human being remained. Investigations involved 5 government agencies, including the FBI. Theories ranged from mutiny to piracy to Soviet sabotage. Some whispered that the Bermuda Triangle's influence extended to these waters. In the century since, no definitive answers have surfaced. 12 men boarded that ship. None were ever seen again. The Carol Deering remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries in American history. Some say the answers lie at the bottom of the Atlantic. Others believe the truth is far stranger. A ghost ship is disturbing, but the next location is where suffering was inflicted on the living for over a century. Number 3. In Morganton stands Broughton Hospital, first established in 1883. It was called the Western North Carolina Insane Asylum. During the 1920s, the patient-to-physician ratio reached 300 to 1. By the 1940s, the hospital population had swelled to over 3,500 patients, crammed into facilities never designed for such numbers. The treatments administered here were nightmares by modern standards. Lobotomies, insulin shock therapy, procedures that left patients permanently altered. The grounds contain a cemetery holding the remains of 1,583 people, including several infants. One of the most shocking events occurred in April of 1971. Dr. Paul Douglas Boyles and nurse administrator Betty Cheek Yarborough were found stabbed inside a locked room. When staff forced the door open, they found Boyles dead with a serrated bread knife through his chest. Mrs. Yarborough died within the hour. The case was never solved. Perhaps the most disturbing story involves a stairwell window where an unstable patient hanged themselves. For years afterward, drivers reported seeing the image of a woman hanging in that window. The site caused so many car accidents that officials eventually boarded up the window entirely. Staff still report an elevator that operates on its own, stopping at floors where no one waits. An asylum with over a century of suffering leaves traces. But the next location is where 2 wars left scars that still have not healed. Number 2. Midway between Wilmington and Southport lie the ruins of Brunswick Town, a ghost town that altered the course of America twice. In the 18th century, this was a thriving port on the Cape Fear River. Then came the Revolutionary War. British forces burned Brunswick Town to the ground in 1776. The town was never rebuilt. Instead, its ruins sat abandoned until the Civil War brought violence back. Confederate forces constructed Fort Anderson directly on top of the colonial remains. Today, you can still see cannon scars on the walls of St. Philip's Anglican Church. The enormous brick skeleton stands as a monument to destruction. Satellite images reveal outlines of structures that have not seen sunlight in 2.5 centuries. Visitors who walk these grounds speak of an unsettling feeling, a sense of being watched. 2 centuries of trauma concentrated in one forgotten place. A town destroyed twice by war carries heavy energy, but our final destination may be the creepiest of all. Number 1. Portsmouth Island sits along the Outer Banks as part of the Cape Lookout National Seashore. It is accessible only by boat. There are no bridges, no ferries running on a regular schedule, just water and wind and silence. In the years following the American Revolution, Portsmouth was a bustling port community. At its peak, over 700 souls called this island home. The majority of inhabitants were African American, both before and after the Civil War. Despite being unable to attend the one schoolhouse due to segregation laws, their community sustained itself through fishing. When the Civil War came, everything changed. The economy never recovered, and the population dwindled year after year. The last 2 residents left in 1971. Their names were Henry Piggott and Marion Gray Babb. When they departed, they closed a chapter of history that had lasted nearly 2 centuries. What they left behind is extraordinary. Churches still stand against the salt air. The old post office remains intact. A general store, a schoolhouse where Black children were forbidden to learn. Homes where families lived and died, all preserved as if waiting for residents who will never return. There are no power lines, no paved roads, no sounds except the wind and the waves and the wild horses that have claimed the empty streets. 700 people once lived here. Now there is only silence. And you can visit it, if you dare take the boat.
According to local legend, a church bell rings on Sunday mornings long after the last congregation left the pews. 3 chapters behind us now, and the South looks different than it did when we began. Every town opened a door that was not there a moment ago. Every road curved into something the map did not prepare you for. But the final chapter of this map does not stay on flat ground. It climbs into mountains where the roads narrow and the tree line closes overhead, and the towns that remain have learned to keep their silence the way other places keep their history, not hidden, not ashamed, just quiet, in a way that feels earned, the way only a place that has outlasted everything, thrown at it, knows how to be quiet, which is the kind of silence that does not comfort you, but does not let you leave either.
Number 10. Cass. Deep in the Allegheny Mountains sits a town where your mobile phone becomes useless. Your GPS sends you in circles. And the silence is so complete, it feels unnatural. Cass was built by the West Virginia Pulp and Paper Company at the turn of the 20th century. By the 1920s, more than 2,000 people called it home. Timber workers and their families filled the streets. Children walked to school. Dogs barked in front yards. The company store did brisk business. Then the lumber ran out. The mill closed in 1960. Workers packed their belongings and left for jobs elsewhere. Cass was abandoned almost overnight. Today, you can still rent the original company houses. You can ride the old logging railroad up the mountain. But something about Cass feels deeply wrong. No children play in the streets. No dogs bark. the driveways sit empty. The houses stand preserved but lifeless, like a museum exhibit of a town that forgot to die completely. Part of the strangeness comes from the nearby Green Bank Observatory. CAS sits within the National Radio Quiet Zone, a federally mandated area where electronic signals are restricted to protect the radio telescope. Your phone will not work here. Your satellite navigation will fail or send you somewhere you did not intend to go. Visitors describe a creeping sense of disconnection. Cut off from the outside world, surrounded by empty houses that look like someone might return any moment. Locals who remember the old days say the mountain never wanted people here in the first place. The timber companies took what they wanted and left. Now the forest is slowly reclaiming what was always its own. Number 9. Grafton. Grafton began as a work camp for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad in the 1850s. During the Civil War, both Union and Confederate forces occupied the town at different times, recognizing its strategic value as a rail hub. Today, Grafton is known for two things. It is the birthplace of Mother's Day, where Anna Jarvis first honored her own mother at a church service in 1908. It also houses both of West Virginia's national cemeteries, where thousands of soldiers from every American conflict lie buried in orderly rows. But Grafton is also known for something that cannot be buried. On the night of June 16, 1964, Robert Cockrell drove home along Riverside Drive. Cockrell worked as a reporter for the local newspaper, the Grafton Sentinel. Around 11 in the evening, his headlights swept across something standing in a clearing near the Tigard Valley River. The figure stood between 7 and 9 feet tall and perhaps 4 feet wide. Its skin appeared smooth and pale, almost like a seal. But the detail that made Cockrell slam his brakes was simpler and more disturbing. The creature had no head. It stood motionless, clearly alive, but making no sound at all. By the next morning, word had spread through Grafton. Other residents came forward with their own encounters. A towering white shape moving through brush along the riverbank, heavy footsteps crashing through the woods at night, and always that strange whistling sound that seemed to come from nowhere. Packs of teenagers and even adults gathered at the sighting location. They carried bats, crowbars, whatever weapons they could find. They searched the woods for nights on end. The creature was never found, never explained. The sighting simply stopped after a few weeks, leaving Grafton with a mystery that persists to this day. Number 8. Flatwoods. September 12, 1952. The height of the Cold War. Americans lived in genuine fear of Soviet attack. School children practiced hiding under their desks. Families built bomb shelters in their gardens. And in the small town of Flatwoods, something fell from the sky. At 7:15 in the evening, two brothers named Edward and Fred May were playing outside with their friend Tommy Heyer. They watched a bright object streak across the darkening sky and appear to land on a nearby hill, on property owned by a farmer named Bailey Fisher. The boys ran home and told their mother, Kathleen May. She gathered a small group including local National Guardsman Eugene Lemon, and they climbed the hill to investigate. What happened next would make national headlines and prompt a United States Air Force investigation. The group reached the hilltop and noticed a strange mist and a pungent metallic smell. Lemon shined his flashlight toward a pair of glowing lights he assumed were animal eyes. Instead, the beam revealed a figure that none of them could explain. It stood over 10 feet tall with a round red face and a pointed hood shape behind its head. It wore what appeared to be a dark pleated skirt or robe, and those glowing eyes stared directly at them. The creature made a hissing sound and glided toward the group. They ran. One of the boys wet himself in terror. Their dog fled with its tail between its legs and reportedly never fully recovered from the experience. The encounter was reported to local authorities and quickly reached the national press. The Air Force investigated as part of Project Blue Book. their official program for studying unidentified flying objects. They concluded the witnesses had seen a meteor and perhaps a barn owl, its eyes reflecting light in an unusual way. But the witnesses never accepted that explanation. Kathleen May went to her grave insisting that what she saw that night was no owl. Whatever landed on that West Virginia hilltop in 1952 remains unexplained. Number 7. Thurmond. At its peak, the town of Thurmond processed 95,000 train passengers every single day. Imagine the platforms packed with travelers, the hotels fully booked, the restaurants and saloons doing roaring business. In the early 20th century, Thurmond was one of the busiest rail hubs in America. The town was formally incorporated in 1900, and it was named for Confederate Captain William Thurmond, who had acquired 73 acres of land along the New River for just $20. The railroad transformed that cheap land into a gold mine. Coal from the surrounding mountains flowed through Thurmond by the trainload, and money followed. But Thurmond's prosperity depended entirely on steam locomotives. When American railroads switched to diesel engines, they no longer needed the coal and water stations that had made Thurmond essential. The town became obsolete almost overnight. Businesses closed, families moved away, and the grand hotels fell silent. Today, Thurmond's population hovers around 5 people. 5 residents govern an entire municipality that once served nearly 100,000 daily visitors. Most of the buildings stand empty, their windows dark, paint peeling. Vines climb the walls, trees push through cracked foundations. Nature is taking back the town, 1 year at a time. Visitors to Thurmond describe an overwhelming sense of absence. You can stand on the old platform and almost hear the ghost of steam whistles, the chatter of passengers, the bustle of a living town, but only almost. The silence that remains feels heavier than mere emptiness. Locals in surrounding areas speak of Thurmond with a mix of nostalgia and unease. Many believe the town is haunted by the thousands who pass through its station, leaving some fragment of themselves behind. Number 6. Kayford. Some towns die because the industry moved away. Kayford died because the industry ate the town itself. The small coal mining community of Kayford existed on Kayford Mountain for over 200 years. Generations of families lived and worked there. They had a general store, a school, a church. Children grew up knowing they would follow their fathers into the mines, just as their fathers had followed their grandfathers. Then came mountaintop removal mining. This technique does not send workers underground to extract coal. Instead, massive machines strip away the entire top of a mountain to reach the coal seams beneath. It is cheaper and requires fewer workers. It also destroys everything on the surface. The community of Kayford was displaced not by economics, but by the literal removal of the ground they lived on. The mining company bought out the residents, demolished the buildings, and carved away the mountain itself. Today, the site looks like a moonscape. Where forests once stood, bare rock and artificial plateaus stretch toward the horizon. Where homes once sheltered families, nothing remains but memories. But not quite nothing. The cemetery survived. The Kayford Community Cemetery sits on a small section of land that was never sold to the mining company. Visitors can still walk among the headstones, reading names and dates that stretch back to the 1800s. The dead of Kayford remain on their mountain, surrounded by the devastation that consumed everything else. Locals say the site feels cursed. The water in surrounding areas tests positive for heavy metals. The ground is unstable. Sinkholes open without warning where mine shafts collapse below. And on that small preserved hilltop, the graves of Kayford outnumber the living. Number 5. Matawan. Most small towns have a defining event in their history. For Matawan, that event was a massacre. On May 19, 1920, the quiet streets of this coal mining town erupted in the deadliest gunfight in American history. The conflict had been building for years. Coal miners across West Virginia were attempting to unionize, demanding safer working conditions and fair pay. The mining companies fought back with every tool available. They hired private security forces, most notoriously the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, whose agents were little more than corporate mercenaries. They evicted union sympathizers from company housing. They brought in strikebreakers to replace any worker who complained. In Matawan, the company attempted to evict several mining families from their homes. The local sheriff, a man named Sid Hatfield, refused to allow it. He stood with the miners against the Baldwin Felts agents. On that May afternoon, the confrontation turned violent. When the shooting stopped, 10 people lay dead, 7 Baldwin Felts agents, the mayor of Matawan, Cable Testerman, and 2 unarmed miners caught in the crossfire. Sid Hatfield became a hero to working people across America. His defiance of corporate power inspired thousands, but his victory was short-lived. On August 1st, 1921, Hatfield walked up the steps of the courthouse in Welch, West Virginia. He was there to stand trial on unrelated charges that most believed were manufactured by the mining companies. He never reached the courtroom door. Baldwin Felts agents shot him down on the courthouse steps. His friend Ed Chambers died beside him. Their wives watched the murders happen. The killing sparked the largest armed uprising in American history since the Civil War. 10,000 coal miners armed themselves and marched on Logan County to confront the mine owners and their private armies. For 5 days, open warfare raged across the West Virginia hills. Federal troops eventually intervened to stop the fighting. Matawan today is a quiet place. A museum tells the story of the massacre. Historic markers note where people died. But older residents still speak carefully about what happened here. The violence was not random. It was systematic. Corporate. The blood spilled in Matawan paid for the labor rights that workers enjoy today. And some say that debt has never been fully settled. Number 4. Weston. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum stands on a hill above the town of Weston. It is the largest hand-cut stone building in North America. Some say it is the second largest in the entire world, after the Kremlin in Moscow. Construction began in 1858, though the Civil War delayed completion. The asylum accepted its first patients in 1864. The building was designed according to the most progressive psychiatric theories of its time. Dr. Thomas Kirkbride believed that mental illness could be treated through a combination of fresh air, meaningful work, and pleasant surroundings. His asylum designs featured long, staggered wings that maximized sunlight and ventilation. Each patient would have their own room. The grounds would include farms and gardens where patients could work outdoors. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was built to house 250 patients in these humane conditions, but demand for beds quickly outstripped capacity. Families desperate for help sent their relatives from across the region, and the asylum accepted them all. By the 1950s, the facility held 2,400 patients, nearly 10 times its intended capacity. Patients slept in hallways. Violence became common in the overcrowded wards. The progressive treatments gave way to simpler methods of control. The asylum performed over 4,000 lobotomies during its operation. Doctors used what became known as the ice pick method, inserting a sharp instrument through the eye socket to sever connections in the brain. Many patients who entered healthy, committed for conditions like asthma, epilepsy, or simply for difficult personalities, left with permanent brain damage. Many never left at all. The conditions inside the asylum deteriorated for decades. Investigations revealed patients living in filth and suffering abuse from overworked and undertrained staff. The facility finally closed in 1994. By that time, over 2,000 people had died within its walls. Their bodies rest in a cemetery on the grounds, many in unmarked graves. Today, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum operates as a tourist attraction. Visitors can take historical tours during the day or ghost hunting tours at night. Staff report constant paranormal activity, doors opening and closing on their own, voices in empty hallways, the sensation of being watched from the cells where patients once spent their final years. Many visitors have fled the building in terror, unable to complete their tours. Number 3. Harper's Ferry. Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1785 that Harper's Ferry was worth a trip across the Atlantic Ocean just to see. Here, the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers crashed together through a gap in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The town that grew up at this confluence became one of the most strategically important locations in American history. In 1859, the abolitionist John Brown led a raid on the Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry. His plan was to seize weapons and distribute them to enslaved people, sparking a massive uprising across the South. The raid failed. Brown was captured, tried, and hanged. But his action helped ignite the Civil War that would begin less than 2 years later. During that war, Harper's Ferry changed hands 8 times between Union and Confederate forces. Both sides recognized its value, controlling the river junction and the railroad that passed through. More than 100 people died in military action here during Brown's raid and the Battle of Harper's Ferry in 1862. Their blood soaked into the cobblestones that visitors still walk today. The town is now preserved as a National Historical Park. Brick buildings from the 1800s line the narrow streets. Churches and shops look much as they did during the Civil War. It would be charming if not for what visitors keep reporting. Tour guides speak of phantom soldiers marching down Shenandoah Street. A woman in period dress appears near St. Peter's Church and then seems to vanish when approached. At the old Confederate mass grave on the hill above town, visitors describe an oppressive sense of grief that has nothing to do with the peaceful scenery. Locals have learned to live with the strangeness. Some say a ghost guards the town spring, protecting a secret entrance to the caves that honeycomb the ground beneath Harper's Ferry. Others claim to see lights in windows of buildings they know to be empty. The town sits atop layers of violent history, and that history refuses to stay buried. Number 2. Lake Shawnee. Children once laughed here. Families once spent summer days riding the Ferris wheel and swimming in the spring-fed lake. The Lake Shawnee amusement park operated for over 60 years, from 1926 until 1988. Generations of West Virginians have happy memories of this place, but Lake Shawnee was built on blood-soaked ground. Some say the land itself remembers. In 1783, more than a century before the amusement park existed, a family named Clay settled on this property near what is now Princeton, West Virginia. The Clays were among the white settlers pushing into Native American territory. On an August day that year, members of the Shawnee tribe attacked the Clay homestead. Mitchell Clay's daughter, age 16, was tomahawked and scalped in the front yard. His 18-year-old son was killed the same way. A third child, also age 16, was captured alive. He was taken to a Shawnee settlement in Ohio and burned at the stake. Mitchell Clay survived only because he was away from home that day. Clay gathered a group of settlers and tracked down the raiding party. They killed several Shawnee warriors in revenge. The cycle of violence continued for years. All of it took place on the land that would later become an amusement park. In the 1980s, archaeologists from Marshall University excavated the Lake Shawnee property. They discovered Native American artifacts dating back thousands of years. More significantly, they found graves. 13 skeletal remains were excavated, mostly elderly people and young children. Researchers estimate the site may contain as many as 3,000 additional burials. The amusement park built atop this burial ground experienced tragedy almost from the beginning. A young girl died on the swing ride in 1966. 2 other children drowned in the lake during the park's operation. By 1988, the park had closed. Today, the rusted swing ride still hangs from its frame. The Ferris wheel stands frozen, its passenger cars swaying slightly in the wind. Visitors report seeing the swings move on their own, as if pushed by unseen hands. A little girl in a pink dress appears near the spot where a child died. Voices call out from the tree line around the abandoned attractions. Lake Shawnee has been named one of the most haunted locations in America. Paranormal investigators have recorded unexplained phenomena throughout the property. The current owners opened the park for special events, allowing visitors to experience the oppressive atmosphere for themselves. Most do not stay long. Number 1, Point Pleasant. Every dark road in West Virginia seems to lead eventually to Point Pleasant. This small town at the confluence of the Ohio and Kanawha rivers has experienced more documented tragedy and unexplained phenomena than any community its size should have to bear. The trouble goes back centuries. In 1774, the Battle of Point Pleasant marked a pivotal moment in colonial expansion into Native American lands. The Shawnee Chief Cornstalk led his warriors against Virginia militia at this spot. The battle was brutal and inconclusive, but it opened the door for white settlement of the Ohio Valley. 3 years later, Chief Cornstalk returned to Point Pleasant under a flag of truce. He came to warn the American colonists that other tribes were joining the British side in the Revolutionary War. Despite his peaceful intentions, American soldiers took Cornstalk prisoner. When a white soldier was killed outside the fort, an angry mob burst into Cornstalk's cell and murdered him along with his son and 2 other Shawnee prisoners. According to legend, Cornstalk's dying words were a curse on Point Pleasant. He vowed that tragedy would plague the town for 200 years. Whether you believe in curses or not, the history that followed is documented fact. In November 1966, something began appearing in the hills around Point Pleasant. Witnesses described a creature between 6 and 7 feet tall, with enormous wings and glowing red eyes. On November 12th, 5 men digging a grave at a cemetery near the Elk River saw it fly overhead. 3 days later, 2 young couples encountered it near the abandoned TNT storage area north of town. The creature chased their car at speeds over 100 miles per hour. More sightings followed throughout late 1966 and 1967. Locals dubbed the creature Mothman. Some thought it was an undiscovered animal. Others believed it was something supernatural. The sightings generated national news coverage. Point Pleasant became briefly famous for its monster. Then came December 15, 1967. The Silver Bridge had connected Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio since 1928. At 5 in the afternoon during rush hour traffic, the bridge was packed with vehicles. Christmas shoppers filled the cars heading home or to the stores across the river. At approximately 5:04 in the afternoon, a single eye-bar in the bridge's chain-link suspension system failed. Within seconds, the entire structure collapsed into the frigid Ohio River. 46 people died. 21 vehicles plunged into the water. Many bodies were never recovered. Some witnesses claimed to see Mothman flying over the bridge just before the collapse. Others said they spotted the creature on the bridge structure itself watching. In the days after the disaster, Mothman sightings stopped almost completely. Whatever had been haunting Point Pleasant seemed to vanish along with the bridge. Was Mothman an omen of disaster? A supernatural guardian trying to warn the town? Or simply a strange coincidence? An unknown creature whose presence happened to overlap with a structural failure? No one knows. The mystery has never been solved. Today, Point Pleasant embraces its dark history. A 12-foot-tall metal statue of Mothman stands in the center of town. A museum dedicated to the creature draws tourists from around the world. Every September, the town hosts the Mothman Festival, celebrating its most famous resident. But older locals tell a different story. They remember the terror of those sightings. They remember the screams and sirens the night the bridge fell. They remember carrying bodies from the river in the dark December cold. And some of them still see things in the sky above Point Pleasant. Things they do not report to newspapers or discuss with tourists. Chief Cornstalk's curse was supposed to last 200 years. That deadline passed in 1977. But ask anyone who lives in Point Pleasant whether the darkness has lifted. Watch their faces carefully as they decide how to answer. Then look up at the hills surrounding the town, where the old TNT bunkers still stand abandoned in the woods, where something walked among the trees 50 years ago, and where, on certain nights, some say it walks still.
The small southern towns are still there. The fog on that first Virginia road is still there this morning. The postcard never showed it. The steeple is still standing. The war memorial has not moved. But the main street that went quiet when we began is still quiet. And now you know what the quiet actually holds. Not emptiness, not nothing. Something that stayed when everything else left. The porch lights that went dark did not all come back on. The doors that closed did not all reopen, but the towns did not disappear. They just stopped explaining themselves to people who were never going to listen. And the South, which has always known how to keep a secret, kept this one the longest.